tell us when the recording's ready. Okay. So 12.8, which is the draft traffic management treatment policy and guidelines. So, councillors, do we have any questions on this item? No? Okay, we've got a additional dot point amendment proposed by Councillor McLennan. Councillor McLennan, do you want to read that out?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in reflection to some of the emails that have circulated, particularly from yourself, around the desire for there to be trees included in traffic calming wherever possible, I was proposing a third dot point to the office recommendation, which would read that Council requests the draft policy be amended to reflect Council's desire for consideration to be given to the planting of trees in median strips or islands, roundabouts, chicanes or along the edge of the road in the development of any future traffic calming solutions.
So you're moving the officer's recommendation with that amendment?
That's correct.
Okay. Councillor Wilding will second that. Anyone against? Okay.
Just a question for through you, Madam Mayor, to our engineering director. Is that feasible? Is it likely to add excessive costs?
Through you, Madam Mayor, the policy is quite prescriptive in its approach to assessing volume, speeds, amenity, and I think this just suggests to staff to consider the implementation of trees. That can become quite expensive, so that when, and I just believe that when we end up in this situation again, that we do consider that the staff do consider trees, and then we put forward to council what that expense may be.
I mean, what my concern was, there was a diagram you provided to us all at the briefing session, and I think that showed an island which had some trees placed inside, but where the road had been widened, that had, I think, removed just as many trees as had been included in the island. So I mean, how would that operate for you in terms of those decisions? Would you be presenting to council only where there was a net gain in trees, or would we try and accommodate trees in the island even if that came at the expense of street trees on either side of the road?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. Through you, Madam Mayor. I think it's just important to note for guidance for staff to consider trees rather than it being a hard and fast rule that's what we're going to implement. In regards to Railway Parade, yes, it's very difficult to accommodate trees. That's the next item on the agenda. Placing and I won't talk about that as yet, but in some instances it is difficult to get trees into the road reserve, but where we are able to do that, then I think it's worth going into the policy and worth considering.
So it's only envisaged that options would be put before council where there was that net gain in trees. So where there was an example such as the railway where you lost trees because you were pursuing the tree in the island, then that probably wouldn't be presented to council, or would that be presented in any event?
Yeah, look, thanks, Councillor, and through you, Madam Mayor, yes, I think that sums it up quite well, that it would be presented to council as an option, which I think should go into the policy, and it's important for staff to consider that. Albeit that in the Railway Parade example, then it does become cost prohibitive, I'd suggest, yeah.
Thank you, sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a mover for that officer recommendation with the amendment. The seconder was Councillor Wilding. Do we have anyone against? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. 12.9 traffic management request for Railway Parade. Would the officer like to talk to this, or we just go straight to questions from the councillors?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think straight to questions. I think we covered this a lot in the briefing
So,
session.
Councillor McLennan first.
Thank you. Just note that seems to be a bit of a difference between the residents' perception of the problems on this, or the residents who have come to council tonight anyway, their perception of what the problem is on this road and what's been objectively assessed through the town's newly adopted policy. When I spoke to you earlier today, you said that this particular road had only scored 30 when it was assessed using the new framework, which is right at the bottom of that category 3. I just wanted to seek to clarify whether things like the slope of the road, the number of vulnerable road users in relation to things like the childcare centre and trying to access the PSB had been taken into consideration in actually scoring this section of road?
Yes, thanks, Councillor. Through you, Madam Mayor, the assessment of the railway parade under both the previous policy and the new current policy does put it right at the bottom of the list when it comes to undertaking some form of intervention. The majority of the speed, and I pulled some stats this afternoon predicting some of these questions, and 99.8% of people are doing under 70 kilometres an hour, and most people are doing under 60, and under the NADA road traffic codes, it's the intervention comes in when the speeds are above 60. So we're talking, and I think the impact on the residents is those the cars that are hooning and the cars that are doing excessive speed. So, and I think that has a significant impact upon their comfort levels, and that's probably quite difficult to assess. I think it is, what contributes to that is the burnouts and the number of people that are doing these excessive speeds, which are from the stats are around like 0.2% of the traffic, and we're talking 0.2% of 35,000. So the traffic counters were out there for 3 weeks. There was 35,000 vehicles, and 0.2% of those were doing excessive speed. So I think it's important to realise that. That doesn't mean we stop monitoring it. It doesn't mean we don't do anything, but it's important to recognise that what we have in place at the moment is contemporary traffic management intervention levels, which is standard across the industry, and it's important to realise that that's what we're trying to apply.
Any other questions, councillors? Councillor Ames.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, and through to Mr. Adams. What was the expected cost that you were putting to the briefing session last week regarding the rubber speed cushions in the area?
The rubber speed cushions was 30k. To you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from councillors? If not, I've got a couple of questions. Hooning. I live on Broadway, so yes, hooning is quite prevalent in that area. So my question is there any real traffic management device that can mitigate hooning other than police radar?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. No, look, I don't think there is. When we do get complaints from residents, we do undertake the assessment. It's a matter of course that we then notify the police if there's speeding and hooning behaviour, which is what we do. So the police are aware of it, and we also encourage the residents to complain to the police. So it's not just a notification from the town; it's a notification from the local residents as well. So the more they can lodge complaints with the police, the more likely there'll be some action.
So that, my next question is, I note that the police are in regular attendance along Ilanthi and that there are almost fortnightly radar along Ilanthi. And I'm assuming that's in respect to the hooning that I've just mentioned. What level of problem is required for the police to consider putting some sort of speed cameras along Railway Parade? At what point do the police actually prioritise an area or a street as requiring that sort of attention?
I can't really comment on what triggers the police to do that, but and I suppose I could imagine it's just the number of vehicles that are speeding, and Ilanthi would attract, being more of a high volume road, would attract more volume, and therefore the likelihood of vehicles speeding is probably higher, and therefore it's a higher focus for the police rather than Railway Parade. Railway Parade is a bit more limited in its function than Ilanthi.
Okay. So this then brings me to my next question. If we've got hooning as being the primary issue along Railway Parade, is there the potential for speed humps installed, creating more of a danger if hoons go over those speed humps at speed? What is the likelihood of that creating issues on such a narrow road?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't really think that is an issue. The speed cushions would assist in keeping the speeds down. There is, a couple of percent that are, doing around the 70 to 80, so that would help to curb those drivers, and also most of the drivers that are doing the right thing by driving between 40 and 60 would probably drop to below the 50. There is stats out there that shows that if you reduce the speeds by 10 kilometres an hour, then the likelihood of having an accident is reduced, and the likelihood of having significant trauma is also reduced. So, the town staff engineers do support the installation of speed cushions in this location, but do consider that there are other measures.
Okay, so that brings me to a question I've asked you previously, in that speed cushions were installed in Anzac Terrace, and correct me if I'm wrong, that has resulted in noise complaints because of vehicles travelling at speed over the speed cushions. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct, Madam Mayor. We are dealing with some complaints. There was extensive community engagement undertaken at the time when the speed humps were proposed, and the majority of the residents were in favour of the speed humps. I think there was also a period when they were taken out. It might have been for the road resurfacing, and then there was support for them going back in again. There are some noise vibration issues that have been raised by one resident that we're dealing with. There might be some more that have concerns as well, but there's been one resident that I've been in contact in the last week.
Okay, so I'll cease and desist for a minute. Any other councillors with questions? Councillor McWilliam.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to the Executive Infrastructure, Untitled perhaps. Not sure. So with the proposed sort of cameras giving feedback, do they actually take a photograph, or are they just responding to something within their radar sort of thing, and just respond to a body moving past at a certain speed? And then, is there any opportunity to actually advance on that? Is there anything slightly more sophisticated that might actually take a picture of a speeding car, given that it is possible for members of the public to take pictures of people on their phones and doing their nails and looking at the road when they're driving. So, you know, I'm just wondering if that's possible.
Thanks, Councillor. Yes, to you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the interactive devices are just to interact to that driver. It doesn't take a photo. I don't know what it would take to consider that, but I think that would be a lot more advanced technology, and would probably, and if we did take a photo, we should probably better left up to the police, that type of
Just
thing.
one little bit more to that. I'm also just thinking about when you go to Costco's and places like that, where you drive into the car park and it automatically records your registration number. So, yeah, that's another sort of piece of technology that maybe you could consider, but I have no idea the cost of that.
So I'm just going to ask another quick question, and so to the officer, I note, I actually drive down that street every single day, so I note that between 5th Avenue and 4th Avenue on the southern side of Railway Parade, there is a section there that doesn't have any trees. So my question to you, Mr. Adams, is if we proceeded with the officer's recommendation or the amendment alternative that's been put forward by Councillor McLennan, would there be the potential to actually look at that particular section in the future to see if there's an ability to take out a bit of the brand new curbing on the southern side that has no trees, to potentially incorporate an island or a slim medium island similar to what is further down near 2nd Avenue. You're looking on maps, I can see that. It is closer to 4th Avenue on the southern side of Railway Parade. And there's about a gap there where you would normally have all those trees that are cropped in a round shape. There's a gap there of around about 4 trees.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, happy to look into that. I can't think at this moment why we wouldn't have planted trees there.
I would suggest, Mr. Adams, that possibly trees were there originally, but over the time perhaps some have died, but it's left a gap there because those trees are in a line all the way down Railway Parade, but that section is missing around about 4 to 5 trees.
Yep, thanks. Happy to look into that.
Okay. Are there any other further questions from councillors? So we have an officer's recommendation. We also have an alternative proposed by Councillor McLennan. Councillor McLennan, would you like to read out your alternative?
Yes, I'm happy to do so, and I would actually like to add a second point. So it's that Council 1 requests the CEO make a submission to Main Roads WA requesting the installation of Remember 50 built-up areas signs in appropriate locations along Railway Parade, and 2 assesses the traffic conditions on Railway Parade again in 12 months' time.
Okay, so you're moving.
I'm happy to move that.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Wilding. Do we have anyone against?
Just a question on that. So the I think officer's recommendation had a budget for that installation. Does the alternate proposed that that's to be paid for by Main Roads or by the town?
If I may, Madam Mayor, that would be paid for by Main Roads, but it's up to their discretion if it gets installed. So we're happy to make the application, but it's a Main Roads cost, yeah.
So can I follow up with a question on that? If it's not paid for by Main Roads, it would come back to us as a budget consideration at mid-year review or at some stage?
No, Main Roads, excuse me, yes, Madam Mayor, Main Roads are the statutory authority for all statutory speed signs, and they're not under the jurisdiction of the town, of local government. Local government installs parking signs and similar signs like that, but signs like this are under the jurisdiction of Main Roads.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Sorry, just a question, Mr. Adams. If this was to be successful and the submission was made to Main Roads and they refused it, I imagine that you would communicate that to councillors and there'd be the opportunity then for us to consider another alternative option.
Yes, thanks, Councillor. Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, we could then go to the next option, which would be we'd probably propose the interactive signs, and then we could keep stepping up the solutions if council desired.
Councillor Ames?
Yeah, thanks very much, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councillor McKennan's alternative in regards to the signs. I'd like to decline the agreement to the 12-month review, but I'd like to throw in another amendment to say, and especially after the community has communicated with us today regarding their thought process around Railway Parade. I'm also a frequent traveller down Railway Parade every day of the week, but those speed cushions, they very much work. I'd like to throw an amendment in that endorses the installation of the rubber cushions at the locations indicated on the report that have been done before.
So Councillor Ames, Councillor McLennan's alternative has been moved and seconded.
Right.
So you don't have the ability to reject the second dot point at this point in
Okay,
time.
okay, that's cool.
And I would like to say that I don't accept your amendment. Sorry.
Okay. So, thank you, Councillor Ames.
Sure.
Okay, so we have a proposal before us. Just before we go to that, can I ask the officer one more question? Informally, I've asked you about that stretch of Railway Parade that has no trees. Would you be able to perhaps provide, if this comes back to council, provide information at that time about that stretch as well and what may or may not work there?
In regards to trees?
Well, in regards to that section near 4th Avenue.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I'll have a look and come back to council.
Okay. Councillor Clifford.
Just a question. I understood Councillor Ames to be attempting to move an amendment, perhaps? Is that what was occurring? So, I mean, whilst it hasn't been accepted by the mover or the seconder, should not Councillor Ames have the opportunity to move an amendment?
I think Councillor Ames was rejecting the second dot point that Councillor McLennan had.
Well, I think that was done in error, and that was a procedural aspect that wasn't understood. But in terms of moving an amendment to say that those cushions would be installed immediately, I understood that to be the thrust of what Councillor Ames was saying.
Thanks, thanks, Councillor Clifford. Yeah, that's correct. Obviously, if the both of the dot points have been moved and seconded by Councillor McLennan's alternative, I accept that, but I'd also like to add an additional amendment for the rubber speed cushions to also be installed immediately as well upon the approval of the motion, the alternative that Councillor McLennan has provided.
So what Councillor McLennan has done, she's rejected incorporating that into her alternative.
Sure.
What can happen now is that I can put it to the vote, and if you vote, if Councillor McLennan's alternative is voted down, it's not supported, then we could go to your alternative.
Can you not combine them both?
Not without the approval of the mover.
Sure, okay.
And because it's been moved and seconded, we're in that process
Sure.
now.
Sure.
So We have a mover for the alternative. We have a seconder. We clearly have someone against.
Well, not really, but I want to throw something on top of it, you know what I mean?
Yes, but you need the,
Yes.
well, because if it was, okay, I'll explain. If it was moving the officer's recommendation, we could debate a third point to put in there, but that's not the case. We're moving Councillor McLennan's alternative. Is that not correct? Right. Peter.
Hello.
Hello.
My understanding is if Councillor McLennan's becomes a substantive motion, then Councillor Haynes can move an alternative.
An alternative amendment.
Substantive.
So I think just like happened, yeah. So I think just like happened earlier, my alternative is now live, and if Councillor Ames wishes to add an additional point, that can be another motion. That if he has a seconder, we can debate that first, and if successful, it could be adopted into the substantive motion which I have moved. Does that make sense?
Okay. So we
You're up.
So I'm up.
You're up.
You're
Okay. Okay.
So do we have some wording, please, for your?
Yes. Yeah. Sure. Absolutely. That. Additionally, that council endorses installation of the number of rubber speed cushions at the locations indicated on the attachment.
You got that, Amy?
When was that?
Immediately, he said.
They are in the attachment.
No, she said immediately was what she said.
Immediately.
Oh yeah, now let's do it. Immediately.
Is there a second?
Endorses the installation of a number of rubber speed cushions at the locations indicated on the attachment.
So do we have a seconder?
So that we can do justice to the, I'll second that. We had people turn up tonight, so just to do justice to what they were seeking so that we can fully debate
So
the
we
item.
have a seconder, and so we have mover, Councillor Ames, seconded, Councillor Lifka. Do we have anyone against? We have a few people against. So, if you would open, Councillor Ames.
Round two. Okay. Hey, look, and we all know that safety is the number one priority of all residents within the town of Bassendean, and it just shows that with different areas that are also considering different types of speed management within the town, that we've had some very successful speed management installations. Not only have they been in different areas of the town, but also on the same sort of stretches of road. There's some information here in the current council, in the current officer's recommendation of putting some interactive signs, which from my personal perspective, I don't think will do it justice for the budget that is there for it. We've had some very successful installations, even though they might be about with a couple of minimal resident, what's I'm looking for here, complaints. I think that the positivity in regards to safety, in regards to being very streetscape same, so like Anzac Terrace to Railway Parade, I think it'll have a very positive outcome to what the residents that are living with their concerns, to be a very positive outcome for the town, and with a very small exchange in budget to what is being proposed by the officers. Thank you.
Councillor Plifka.
I'll reserve again.
Councillor McLennan.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Ames, and I fully appreciate the safety concerns. Like sitting here and listening to people talking about their concerns for themselves, their families, and other members of the community is something that I think we all take very seriously. In regards to the proposal for installing the speed cushions, I have a number of concerns with that. Firstly, we just adopted a new policy which gave us an objective measure of how we were going to make decisions around traffic calming. We get lots of reports from various members in the community from different streets, concerns about speed on their road, and if every time we had concerns, we spent $30,000 installing speed cushions, there'd be no money left for anything else in the town. So I think it's fantastic that we now have an objective way of determining which streets are the priority. As we know, this street has been assessed as Category 3 under the new policy, so it would not warrant having infrastructure like speed cushions installed. It's right at the bottom of Category 3 as well, so considering spending money on even signage is something that council would need to weigh up. And as the staff have mentioned, 99.8% of the road users are under 70 kilometres an hour, and I know that that's still a significant speed over the 50 kilometre limit, but it is a small percentage that are causing problems. We've heard that it's a Hooning issue, and that the measures that are being proposed are probably unlikely to address that. I'd encourage the people on that street to continuously report to the police, because probably the best way of managing this is getting some police presence on that road and having a radar and fines being imposed for the people who are exceeding the speed limit. I think that the point about immediately, that's also not possible, considering that our policy requires us to consult with the community on that street and 100 metres from that street, and needing to get at least the majority of support from those residents before we could install cushions. So it would be premature for us to immediately do that, and we'd also need to consider the budget allocation in the coming financial year. So for those reasons, I don't support installing the speed cushions. I do, however, think we need to do something, which is why I proposed the alternative, where the first port of call is to go to main roads, seek to have those signs installed. That would be at no cost to the town. We can assess the benefit and the effectiveness of those signs, and if it's not achieving what we need it to do and there are ongoing concerns, then we can have a look at other options in future. So unfortunately, although I appreciate the safety concerns, I won't be supporting your amendment.
Any other speakers for? Speakers against? Sorry, Councillor Blither. Sorry, I keep
No, that's all right.
seeing your hands.
Yes, so the in terms of the budget for this, I mean, we did have a budgetary allocation. We were prepared to spend $20,000 on this more passive measure. That was under the officer's recommendation. There was a 20,000 which was we were proposing to spend. That was mentioned there. I think that figure does appear in the documentation. Obviously, speed cushions are more expensive. I think the figure of 30,000 has been given for that. So, I mean, the difference between the two isn't that great. So it's not a bridge too far if we were minded to do so. I mean, my concern is that the policy that we've put in place and all of the monitoring is targeted at rational people. But that's not what we're dealing with. We're dealing with, we've heard from the residents that have come along with Hoons. They're not going to stop. Now, if you have a sign which tells them how fast they're going, the first time they'll go past, the second time they'll go past to see if they can go faster, and the third time they'll go even faster still. This is a relatively long stretch of road, so I wouldn't be confident with just relying on the goodwill of these Hoons to say, well, you're breaking the law, stop it. We need to physically restrain them from using our roads in this way. They're the kind of people that are going to kill someone. It's not the person that's exceeding the speed limit by 10 kilometres an hour because they're distracted, doing their nails, as was mentioned earlier. I mean, it's these people that are dedicated to driving along the road at as fast a speed as possible. So I think we do need to take that very seriously. I understand there is a process for that. I'd like some sort of physical barrier to stop these people from doing what they're doing. Speed islands will work probably more so towards the people that are doing these sorts of things on account of their cars generally having less clearance than regular motor vehicles. So if we had some sort of island or speed cushion, I think it would be a real deterrent to the people that are posing the greatest threat to our community. So that's why I would support the amendment that's been put forward by Councillor Ames.
Thank you. Any speakers against? Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Regarding the proposal, I see the motion that I seconded, the substantive motion, as a really valuable first step in the process, given that it isn't a significant budget allocation, given that it's none, and that it addresses a problem which is more in line with what the town is actually equipped to deal with. So I take Councillor Politica's point that Hoons are a significant problem. My concern with jumping to this stage of having speed cushions in is, as with any community safety approach, you have the potential for that displacement effect where you install speed cushions in railway parade, and the Hoons who, as Councillor Politica pointed out, are determined to Hoon, will hoon on a nearby street. So you've got 4 very straight avenues next to Railway Parade, and you'd end up playing a game of cat and mouse if for every single street there was hooning on, you put in speed cushions. You just have speed cushions through the whole town. So I believe the town needs to work in a coordinated approach with main roads and with the police to sort of address hooning as a legal issue outside of the scope of the town, and do what it can within its remit to actually encourage those drivers who aren't hooning but may. And I've driven along Railway Parade. It's easy to speed on Railway Parade, and those reminders, I think, are a really good nudge to the majority of the population to do the right thing, to keep doing the right thing.
Okay. Any speakers against?
So just a point. The thing about speed cushions is that if you want to go over them smoothly, the driving technique is to speed up, just as you approach them, and you go over quite happily. So it's probably not going to do anything to really slow them down. That will probably just provide another opportunity to put the pedal to the metal, as they say. I do think that they need to be discouraged, and I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Ames, and I think that there will be opportunities for us to identify what is the most appropriate way to discourage this behaviour. I have a feeling that the answer may lie with CCTV.
Okay. Closing, Councillor Ames.
No, thanks for throwing me against the wall for round 2, but it's all part of the experience.
So, councillors, I'm going to put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Ames and Councillor Polifka. All those against? Councillor McLennan, McWilliam, Wilding and Hamilton. Before we go back to Councillor McLennan's alternative, I'd ask Councillor McLennan if she might consider incorporating an additional point that I've just written out. I'll read it out and we'll see where we go with it. Request the staff investigate and provide a report to Council re the potential to install a median island near 4th Avenue where there are no trees on the southern side of Railway Parade, inclusive of costings. Sorry, I can't read that. Request the CEO, not staff.
Could you just please maybe read that again?
Okay. Request the CEO investigate and provide a report with the potential to install a median island near 4th Avenue where there are no trees on the southern side of Railway Parade, inclusive of costings.
Mr. Adams, do you have any objection to providing this information to council?
Do I have a choice?
I'm seeking your guidance. If it is a waste of officer time,
I do think it's a waste of officer time. Yeah, it'll be significant. It'll be a significant cost to install one tree, and as we were to install a tree at a location.
a median island.
A median with trees. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that's going to have a impact on the traffic. It's not. I don't believe it's going to have an impact on the traffic, and I do think it is a waste of time. But
Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it. Councillor Humphrey, I understand what you're trying to achieve, but I'm happy at this stage just to start with the signage and then progress from there if necessary.
Thank you. I lived all of that. Okay, so we go back to Councillor McLennan having moved her alternative. Councillor Wilding seconded. Do we have anyone against? I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Okay. 12.10, which is the draft Town of Bassendean Corporate Business Plan. So, do we have any questions on this one? Councillor McLennan?
Sorry, can I just seek to clarify the only changes that I noted between the briefing session and this agenda was to the Disability Access and Inclusion Plan and the reconciliation items. Were they the only changes made?
I should just check,
Yeah.
sorry. You're correct about the access and inclusion, and also implementation of living streams on page 14 of 30. Councillor Hamilton indicated
Yeah.
a desire for out years, but no funding at this stage. And also prepare a precinct structure plan on page 17. That work will continue in the out years, but no funding at this stage.
So can I just clarify the years that are marked with no funding, that will still come to us as a budget consideration?
That's correct.
Right, okay,
That's correct.
thank you.
And just to complete my question.
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
The response to Councillor McLennan, page 28, in regards to establishing strategy to enhance partnerships, participation and engagement of our people. That work commencing in 21-22. There may be some budget implications which I'll bring to council if required. And I believe that was
Thank you. No, that's fabulous. I was just having trouble seeing some of the hollow red dots and I wasn't sure if I'd missed any, so thank you for the clarification.
So, can, oh, sorry, I was going to ask a question. On section 1.5, which is page 9 of the attachment, we've got creation of a BIC reserve concept plan, which is obviously in 21-22 this year, this financial year. May I ask if it would be, to implement that plan, should we not have a hollow circle in the 22-23 year to bring implementation forward as a budget consideration?
certainly we can flag that at this stage if you like.
Okay. So that's 1.5. There's 1.7. Sorry. I was curious about the previous corporate business plan had a priority there, a project which was undertake a precinct planning approach in and around parks and playgrounds to improve amenity. Now that's absent from this draft corporate business plan, so that was what was in the previous. Is this duplicated? I don't see it duplicated anywhere else in the corporate business plan, but there's something a little bit similar, so.
Yeah, and I guess that particular statement is probably more a philosophical statement and something that we're trying to achieve through integrating all of our plans. So we've obviously developed asset management plans, working on public open space strategy, long-term financial plan. So the idea of a precinct plan is where the opportunity is to focus on a particular location, whether it's Success Hill or Point Reserve, that we would look at, I guess, all of our potential planning expenditure in the out years and how we can better align it, and that will give us that sort of more precinct approach. So it's almost like an output or byproduct of more integrated planning. Makes sense?
Okay. So we'll cross that one off the list. We'll go to 1.2 on page 60. And again, in the previous corporate business plan, we had co-design community amenity where opportunities exist to promote multi-use and social benefits. Now, I believe that that is something that we as a council have articulated in the past, yet that is not incorporated in this current draft corporate business plan. Is there difficulty, do you see a reason why that would not be included, given that's a stated that was in our previous corporate business plan, and that is no longer included. Could you just provide councillors with some information on how we move forward with workforce plans into the future, given that it's no longer, it appears to be no longer provided as an annual review?
It's actually a mandatory requirement that we do annual review of our workforce plan as part of the integrated planning and reporting framework. So it's a requirement under our regulations. Whether we want to put all our compliance requirements into our corporate business plan or not is something that will happen in any event.
Okay. So that means I've only got one additional one, which was 1.5, which was it's a big reserve.
Certainly.
Councillor Wilding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is regarding the youth statement, which I believe was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, written originally in 2015 and revised in 2018 and endorsed by council. Does it appear at all in the corporate business plan at this current point?
The youth statement.
Or youth strategy? It's something along those lines?
I'm not sure. I'll just ask.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd suggest it's not in the corporate business plan. It's certainly publicly available, but I don't think it's been embedded into the CBP.
To clarify my question, there's a number of desired outcomes in the youth strategy or the statement, whatever the name might be. I'm seeking to clarify if we work towards any of those particular outcomes, when such a statement might be revised, considering it was last revised in 2018, and if there's scope to do any of those particular projects to meet the expectations of that statement within the corporate business plan.
Yeah, probably have to take that on notice. Don't have that information at hand, but be happy to take it on notice. Follow that up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Just procedurally, if we're to vote on the corporate business plan tonight and there are items I was intending to add to the corporate business plan, how does taking a point on notice work in terms of including them in the plan?
We're commencing a new planning cycle in February for 22-23, so that would be an opportunity to raise new projects if there's a desire. But one of the undertakings I can do in the interim is get back to you in regards to the youth statement.
Thank you, Madam CEO. Just to clarify, is the corporate business plan that we're discussing tonight intended to inform those discussions that we'll be having in February?
So this corporate business plan was developed on the back of the 21-22 budget that was approved in late July by the previous council. So unfortunately, because of caretaker, I couldn't bring it to council any earlier.
Right.
So it really reflects, almost a year that we're halfway through. So the projects in here are resourced either through specific budget allocations that council made for specific projects or through our internal resourcing of staff. So I guess if there were any new projects proposed for this year, it would probably be something that would need further consideration, given these have all been allocated resourcing and are currently in performance plans and CEO KPIs, etc.
So there wouldn't be any difficulty in then adding projects to the 2022-2023
No, absolutely,
aspect of
and
the plan?
that's the opportunity for council, where we will actually communicate those ongoing commitments and I guess test whether they continue to be priorities for council, but also where there's capacity or wriggle room to think about what else would you like to achieve going forward, whether it's in the 22-23 year or in those out years. And we're also working on reviewing our long-term financial plan as well,
officer's recommendation that council adopts the Town of Bassendean Corporate Business Plan 2021-25 as attached in this report. I've actually suggested an amendment to 1.5 of the attachment, creation of a BIC reserve concept plan that we put in for the 22-23 year consideration of implementation. So that's not committing us to expenditure, it's just committing that it will be brought forward in the budget for consideration. Yes, I know. So I'm moving that with that amendment to 1.5 in the attachments. Is there a seconder for this? Councillor Wilding? Anyone against? All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Moving on to 12.11, adoption of quarterly report and period ending the September 2021. Are there any questions? Sorry.
Did we carry that on block?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Apologies. I should keep my page open. Okay. 12.13, monthly financial report, September and October 2021. Do we have any questions on this item?
Yep.
13.
Just a question on that.
Councillor Plivka.
So I see that it's on page 70. We're amending the budget in respect of drainage to 77 Hamilton Street and 50 Harcourt Street. I'm just wondering how that arose. Is that a contingency we couldn't foresee and there was some sort of failure with the drainage, or I mean, what is that?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I might start off by just saying it was in last year's budget as a capital item, capital project item. So it was funded in the budget last year, but not completed prior to the 30th of June. And there was a failure to carry forward the unspent funds from that budget into the current financial year.
Well, that answers that then. I don't need any more. Thanks for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions, councillors? Could I just ask Mr. White, previously I've highlighted other councils that provide a project list either just prior or during the budget process, considering the new budget, and they often have an update on projects but also list the carry forward projects. Is it worth discussing at some future date implementing that sort of process in our budget so that councillors can be well aware of the projects that are going to be carried forward? I know that we were aware of major projects that are going to be carried forward, but some of these seem to be little projects that escaped our attention.
Through you, Madam Mayor, certainly it's earmarked for, I think, the first budget workshop after the mid-year review to sort of bring the current projects to council with a status update, how things are progressing as far as actually delivering the project, and also how things are progressing as far as the budget, whether it's likely to be expended in the current financial year and likely to need to carry forward into the following year. So certainly implemented or incorporated as part of the next budget process, councils will be asked to participate in.
Thank you, Mr. White. Are there any other questions, councillors? So we have an officer's recommendation that receives the monthly financial report for September and October 2021 and adopts the budget amendments as identified in that table on page 70. Do we have a mover? Councillor McLennan, seconded. Councillor Ames.
It was actually Councillor McMillan.
Councillor McLennan.
You were quick.
I didn't have my hand up. It wasn't me.
Only our mothers can tell us.
Okay. Okay. Do we have anyone against? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Okay. So, so we move to confidential business. Oh, yes, we have the calendar, sorry, we've got the calendar 12:15, where there's a slight amendment to the calendar. So I believe that amendment is the Perth Airport Community Forums.
Should be the municipalities group, Perth Airport Municipalities Group, it was actually an error,
Okay, so it's a typo.
and that's been postponed to a date to be set, so I believe that.
So that's a slight amendment to that particular item. So with that amendment, do we have a mover? Councillor McLennan, seconded. Councillor Wilding, anyone against? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously.